People today think about ontology in terms of bottom-up processes. We explain more complex things by saying that they emerge from simpler things. This is a very intuitive notion for us today. It can be hard to think any other way about the existence of the objects we perceive. If we see a robin sitting on a branch, and we want to explain why that robin exists, we automatically go to its evolutionary history. If we want to explain why life exists, we refer immediately to organic chemistry and simple self-replicating systems. To explain organic chemistry, we say it emerges from inorganic chemistry. The heavy elements emerge through fusion from lighter elements. At a certain point in time, there was only hydrogen and helium. And then through complex processes, all more complex systems emerged. But what's left out of that account of ontology is the issue of which emergent structures are possible before they're actual. Or is there no difference between possible and impossible emergent future structures? Was the robin possible before the robin actually existed? If there's no difference between possible and impossible futures, then reality is not really law-like at all, and anything can happen at any time. And the fact that language works, the fact that perception works, is just a miracle. And that would be very odd. So instead, it seems more reasonable to suppose that it was the case that the robin was possible even before the robin actually existed. But if it was the case that the robin was a possible being, a potential being, then all of its properties were also potential, because the sum of those properties basically constitute the robin. If we're saying the robin was possible, then we're saying an animal with the diet that a robin has was possible. The kind of feather that the robin has on its tail was possible. All of the properties that the robin in actuality possesses were there in potentia. All of those properties were already possible. And true propositions could characterize all of those possible properties. So every detail, down to the most minute, about the robin was already true or false before the robin actually existed. I know it's a subtle point, but if we're saying that there was a difference between possible futures and impossible futures before those futures actually came about, then we're saying the properties of those futures were already predicated by true propositions. So there was an infinite set of true propositions characterizing an infinite set of possible beings at the moment of the Big Bang. Which raises the question, how did the universe contain that infinite set of true propositions? But if that was the case, then bottom-up emergence does not explain very much. It only explains why a being is actual, not why it has those properties which it in fact has. Those properties didn't come into being through emergence because they were already true in potentia. So they can't have originated with the instantiation of that being. This points to the alternative to a bottom-up ontology, a top-down ontology. All true propositions are true eternally. All truths are eternal. And we are what we are because of the way in which we combine all of those already existing forms. I will say that, to be fair, there are alternative bottom-up ontologies that get to be a little bit more sensible than supposing that the future is completely random. You could also say that prior to the moment of actualization of an emergent system, it wasn't true that any particular system was possible or impossible. Once this novelty is introduced, though, it sets into being habits that are very hard to break. And so any new emergent structure is totally random, but once it's there, it's kind of locked in, which would explain why perception more or less works. This is actually, I think, what Rupert Sheldrake originally held to with morphic resonance, and that's where I differ from him. The problem with that view is when you get to mathematical truth, because if that's the way that persistent structures emerge across the spectrum in reality, then that would imply that the Pythagorean theorem wasn't true or false before Pythagoras or whomever first discovered it. And the idea of discovering a mathematical truth would be rendered absurd. You couldn't discover any mathematical truth prior to the first observation of it because it came into being with that first observation. And questions of what constitutes precisely mathematical truth are then raised. Like something like the Mandelbrot set. It has an infinite set of true propositions which characterize it. Did that infinite set spring into being simultaneously the moment that Mandelbrot first contemplated the possibility of that structure? If he had contemplated another kind of set that ended up having some inconsistency, that wasn't coherent with itself, would that have generated a true structure? It seems like if you're not saying that certain laws have to apply to all mathematical structures, then which mathematical discoveries get to turn out to be post facto true and which don't? It's an odd position. A little simpler, I think, just to assume that mathematical truth in its entirety already eternally exists and we can discover it. So, yeah, that would be a top-down explanation for the way things are. But bottom-up explanations are so ingrained in our way of thinking that it's difficult to think of many problems outside of that concept. When we think about friendship, we often think about making friends. We think about ways in which we can act that will generate a friendship. The friendship is an emergent structure, right? We create friendship in a bottom-up way. But that's not the way that Plato would go. That's not the top-down ontological conception. Friendship is a form that we participate of. We can't just arbitrarily generate friends. There is already a finite set of other people who we could be joined in friendship with. They already exist, potentially, as friends. They're already out there. And so it's really not about making friends. It's not about generating friends. It's about recognizing your true friends. Who are your true friends? When it comes to a plan for your life, you could think about creativity. You could think about life as an artistic expression, as something that you make. Or you can think about the idea that there is a best version of yourself. There is something that you are called towards, because that is your most perfect actualization. If that already exists, it's just a matter of finding it. If you don't believe that that top-down structure is there, ready to participate in, then it can only ever be up to you to generate this stuff. When I thought about the idea of peer academy and how an alternative academic system could work, I was very conscious going through school that there were a lot of problems in the way that teachers and students interacted, in the way that students were gathered together, the way we progressed through the curriculum. And I've always thought about educational philosophy pretty seriously, but I didn't think that you could just come up with some answer that would be the right answer. I've always thought about it in terms of trying to discover a right answer that was already there. Our time demands a solution. There is a right answer. There is a best life that we could share in common. There are best practices that we can discover. I didn't think about it like I would generate this thing and kind of scheme it up and invent it. I really don't think about those things in terms of invention. I certainly don't think about my philosophy in terms of invention. I think that it's already there, just like the sculpture is already there in the block of marble, and you just have to find its limits by removing the excess. But that issue of friendship, I think, is especially important. I've criticized people in the past of trying to rely on friendship, trying to rely on good feelings, basically. And the problem is that people's notion of friendship is sentimental. In the Lysis, Plato addresses the issue of friendship, and they look at how friendship is brought into being. Socrates is talking to Lysis and his friend Menexenus, I want to say, and they're younger, they're two boys, and he's impressed that they have this friendship, whereas he's very old and he wants friends dearly, but it seems like he can't get this true friendship that they have. So he asks, how is it that a friendship comes about? And they suggest that when one person has this feeling of philia for the other, that generates friendship. But it can't just be one person who generates philia, because the other person might really dislike you, and then you would be the friend of your enemy. And then are the two people enemies, or are they friends? Today we're comfortable contemplating the idea that you can be both two mutually contradictory properties. But if the two people are truly friends, they can't also be not friends. But they look at the issue of whether this feeling could be mutual. Two people who feel philia generate friendship, bottom up. But in that case, then, a father couldn't really be the friend of his infant son, who isn't mature enough to feel philia back towards him. And then there's no real friendship there, or for that matter, inanimate things that we talk about in terms of this filial love, like philosophy. Can you not be a friend of wisdom? Can you not be a friend of man, philanthropy, these sorts of things? If they're not reciprocal, then they can't exist. So if mutual affection is necessary to generate friendship, then there's no friendship between man and the things that help man. Obviously, this is a broader concept of friendship than the English word friendship. It's the Greek term philia. A suggestion is made with reference to a verse of poetry which says that the gods are always bringing like and like together. Socrates kind of deciphers that, saying that, certainly they're not saying that the bad is brought together with the bad in friendship, because the bad hurts those who are nearby. By like and like, they must mean that the bad and bad are always dissimilar. Evil is always manifold and dissimilar to itself and can never be brought together, whereas only the good can truly be like. Great minds think alike. The good converges on this one thing. The many are constantly diverging and can never be brought together. And so the gods bring together the good. And that seems pretty satisfying. And there's something to that. We don't generate friendship. The gods bring us together. Friendship is an energy that descends to us and unifies us. It's not a state of sentiment. Our sentiments don't generate friendship. It's an energy that we can receive. But what kind of energy is it? The reason that I've criticized the idea of friendship is that it's thought of in too sentimental of terms, and it's also lacking those other energies which must accompany it. The virtues always have to accompany each other. They can't stand in isolation. Courage without wisdom is not a virtue. You need all of the virtues together. And friendship on its own, sentiment on its own, feelings of fondness, feelings of national pride, whatever it is, they're not enough. Those feelings are not enough. You need the holistic picture. But first of all, what is friendship? That's the question in the Lysis. Well, according to Proclus, the first being is the one, and the next level of beings are the henads, and they are different aspects of the one. So health is an aspect of unity. It integrates the body and the mind. Friendship is an aspect of unity. It brings things together. The guardian is an aspect of unity. It preserves. Wisdom is an aspect of unity. Proclus identified these henads as the gods in the Greek pantheon. They are like the form of forms. There's only one form of forms, which is the good, but then the next level, the most primitive types, are these aspects of unity. And they all blend together when they're perfected. So with friendship, you need health, you need wisdom, you need all of these properties to come together and receive that complete energy. But then there's the question of what sort of people can be brought together in friendship. Because we've already said the bad can't be friends with the bad because they'll hurt each other. But if we look at a mafia, they can be brought together in friendship, but not insofar as they are exclusively bad. They have bad qualities, but they also have good qualities. They have loyalty, they respect one another's courage and competence. There's something that they have to offer one another. On the other hand, the perfectly good man doesn't really need friends if he is, in fact, perfectly good. If you've attained perfect goodness, by definition, you lack nothing. The perfectly wise man doesn't have any need for a friend who is perfectly wise. He might need a friend that has other good qualities, maybe a friend that knows how to cook, and then he can eat good food. A friend that is a soldier, and then he can defend his family. But insofar as you're perfectly wise or perfectly good, you don't need more wisdom and goodness. So the perfectly bad is not friends with the perfectly bad. The perfectly good is not friends with anything because it doesn't partake of multiplicity. The good is the one. So it's only the mixed, the things that are partly good and partly bad, They can be naturally friends with one another. And that's the key criteria. What are those beings that the gods bring together? They are beings that have complementary goods to offer to one another. Where I have one set of skills, you have another set of skills. I have some emotional sensitivities and needs, and you have other emotional sensitivities and needs. And because of that, we can help each other. Now, unless you're perfectly good or completely bad, there are friends out there who can help you. And the purpose of friendship is revealed in this top-down concept. This is a far cry from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's not about manipulating people's sentiments to advance your career. It's not about gaining opportunity or clout or any of these kind of instrumentalized concepts of friendship. It's not about satisfying your feelings. What is friendship about? It's about returning to the one. It's about moving towards God. That's how we move towards God. Participating in unity. Friendship is a unity. It is a good. Unless you're perfectly bad. When we look at the trajectory of friendship in this country, in the modern day, it's not good. People have fewer close friends than they did 30 years ago. 100 years ago, the average American was a member of multiple voluntary associations, charity groups, Rotary clubs, the Elks Lodge, fraternities like the Masons, stuff like that, community bands, chess clubs, book clubs, theater groups. Voluntary associations like that were way more common, and they were seen as obviously, like, self-evidently good things to do. Today, those sorts of associations are rare. People tend only to want to spend time associating in ways that are good for some other end. In mining towns, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the workers who had far greater hardship than we have today would get together to play in brass bands together, and that was good enough. That's what they cared about. That kind of spirit of friendship is not as present with us today. Now, why do you think that is? Is it that we have become so perfectly good that we don't have need of friends? Or is it because we have become worse and we tend to hurt one another more easily? If that's the case, if we are becoming worse and friendship is becoming rarer, we need to understand what friendship is and how we receive it, not how we generate it, not how you make friends. Your friends are already out there. They're just potential. There are a finite number of them. They're doing various things right now, and they can be brought together. But they need to be brought together simultaneously by a spirit of friendship and also of courage, also of wisdom. All the aspects of unity need to be present. All the virtues need to be present. It needs to be a well-integrated whole that we're looking for. And that's, for me, that's what Pure Academy is about. It's creating that well-integrated whole. It's coming up with reasons at all scales: economic reasons to cooperate, academic reasons to cooperate, political reasons to cooperate, for the benefit of the broader community, for our benefit, to benefit our own social position. One thing that happens with friendship is that it has a kind of gravitational attraction. When you have a true friendship, other people are drawn into that. I remember in college, I lived on the 8th floor of my dorm building, And the seventh floor was kind of joined by a staircase, and I would always see this group of guys down, just kind of hanging out in the area down there, the, I guess, common area for their floor, and I was drawn in to that friendship, and so I joined them and I started hanging out with them, and then other people who I knew were kind of brought into that group, and that was a very close group of friends that I had for years, and that was meaningful to me. There is a kind of gravity in friendship, and I might not have been drawn to any one of them in isolation, but the fact that that friendship existed, it had a calling. Uh, and that is how it works. So, I kind of imagine sometimes when one day, Pure Academy is real, that it'll be an example that people will want to emulate. They'll see the reality of it, they'll see the friendship, they'll see what there's something higher going on. And, people in the local area, people nearby, when they see that bond, they're going to be drawn into it. And that's going to improve all of our prospects. Men and women are drawn into friendship, drawn into community, if it comes from a place of selflessness, where it's not you creating friendships in order to benefit yourself, but it's you participating in a friendship that is larger than yourself. It also enhances your prospects. It also makes you more competent, more virtuous. It improves you. You learn from your friends. It's like, if you seek the things that you want, you won't necessarily get them. But if you seek God, everything else will follow. Some of the things that you thought you wanted will fall away. They were unimportant. And then other things that you found, that you find out that you really need, those you get once you set your sights in the right direction. We need to look towards God and unity, and that should inform our concept of friendship. But to have that accurate concept, we have to reform our ontology. We have to reform our metaphysics and our theology and the way we think about the nature of our souls. We need to think about these things, because right now we are living and working with the concepts invented by people who are in power by virtue of parasitism, by virtue of usury, by virtue of systems that they set up over thousands of years, assiduously. We can't rely on those inherited notions. We have to think for ourselves and go to the intellectual heritage that we have received. Go to Plato. Go to these other thinkers throughout the Western tradition that have explored these ideas. I think it's a very necessary thing today. And again, it's not that we generate this, we find the right answer. The right answers are there in the Platonic realm. We just have to summon their energies. We have to engage in that theurgy and call down the appropriate divine spirit to guide us. And it will, 100% it will. But you need to kind of humble yourself before it and be willing to receive it. When that higher spirit calls, are you responding? The fact that our society is breaking up, the fact that we're losing social integration, just means we have a greater need of friendship now than we ever have before. So, a lot of people, they want to make it something that's theirs. My friends, I'll make my friends and make my life what I want it to be. But we just end up isolating ourselves when we think that way, when we want to be in control. I don't want to be in control. I want to find what's right and go towards that. And I know that I have a lot of faults that prevent me from doing that. And I know that friendships are able to round that out, and we can correct one another's defects and short-sightedness. So just, I've kind of talked down friendship relatively recently. I've also just talked down everybody who watches my videos recently, not because I think that you're bad people, but because I think you're great people, and I want to see our potential manifest. And I think this is the key. It's not bottom up, it's top down. It comes from above. And you just have to listen and be ready. Thank you for listening.